I can't believe it. I struggle with this. The fact that there are 200,000 subscribers on this channel. 200,000 people. That's a lot of people. I never intended for this channel to get this big. I first started my YouTube channel just to put my projects and my cars out there, maybe help others feel less overwhelmed by their own car projects. And now here we are, tearing down blown engines every single week. You guys get to see my own personal car projects and some rescues and some other industry-specific things in the future. But 200,000 subs, I just can't believe it. And there's no other words to say other than thank you. Because I don't know what it has changed my life's trajectory completely. And I'm overwhelmed by the amount of support. I'm not going to get all teary-eyed. Instead, we're going to tear down engines because that's what today's video is about. And instead of just doing one engine, that's boring. Okay, maybe it's not boring. We're going to do two engines because it's the 200,000 subscriber special, not the 100,000 subscriber special. And yes, I could do a yard tour or we could talk about the future of the channel, but that's for other videos. We're going to see some carnage today because I picked the worst two LS-based engines from the last batch of engines I bought. We have a 6.2 liter L94, which is a 2013 Yukon Denali engine. It was a core return. And then this is a 2007 to 2009. It's an LMG. It's 5.3 liter iron block. These are both Gen 4 LS architecture engines, and these are the worst two. Now, when I say that, I know I'm excited to see some blown up stuff, but that one was expensive, and I hope it's okay. It's probably not going to be okay. Well, we are going to start out with the all aluminum 6.2. I'm going to wheel this guy over here for later. And yes, we are using the engine stand, which has been slightly compromised by the Dodge Ram V10, but not in a way that's going to cause an engine to fall. It actually is just worst case scenario, a wheel's going to break. Don't look there. So this engine apparently turns really well one direction into a point and then back to another point and then it's locked up. Let's verify that. I will say that it did come in kind of haphazardly disassembled to a degree, but there are no spark plugs in it. So we can't tell if there's malice in the combustion palace until we pull ahead. But we can turn it over. So let's do that first. Surely it's not as bad as they say. Well, it doesn't go that way. Oh, it goes this way just fine. We're just going to power through whatever that was. And we're not powering through that. No! No! Dang it! That was... Now what am I going to do? Well, it made its final pop. Well, last week that bar hit me in the head, which felt great, and this week it broke. I don't know what we're going to do to get the head bolts out. We'll get there, but let's get this harness off. Oh, it's still bolted to the intake. The intake's not bolted down. Well, let's get this separated. Oh, I gotta unplug all these injectors, or at least a couple of them. This harness might actually be good. I don't see any cut wires, and this is a 6-speed harness, so that would be really good. Let's take a peek here. Well, those don't want to let go very easily. All right. To get the intake off, you just... All right, intake's off. Well, there's some debris in there. I don't see anything. That valve looks a little bent. That looks just a smidge bent. Some more debris in there. That valve looks open, and that one's had water in it. That one's got a little bit of debris. That one looks okay. That one looks all right. Well, I don't see any chunks of metal, so that's a good sign. I guess we'll start with the left-hand valve cover. Everything seems to feel okay. This one's a little off center here. I don't know if that's a problem or not. Well, this is pretty grimy and grungy looking in here. I definitely don't think this engine was well maintained. The one thing that looks odd to me is this rocker arm right here. Now, some of these are offset, this rectangle port heads, but you can see this rocker is centered. This one is not. So I wonder if there's a problem with that cylinder. Let's go to the other side. Well, that was loose. They're all loose. It's always a good sign. This side has the same dark discoloration. None of the rockers seem to be out of place on this side. Maybe a little bit there. Nothing too alarming. I don't see chunks of metal. I don't see sparkles, no forbidden glitter. But now we must dig deeper. Before we go too much further, we're going to get these exhaust manifolds out of the way. Just get this out of the way quick. On this side, I must fight the dipstick. Hopefully it's not a fight. I'm sure it'll come right out. They always do. Wow, it rotates. One, I still have another one to battle after this.
That one broke.
While we're here with the impact, we'll get this bracket out of the way. Well, that wasn't hiding any holes, so that's good. Next, we're going to break these rockers loose. Well, these push rods all look pretty decent. Now that one's not perfect. I'll show you that in just a minute. Well, none of those are bent, so that's a good sign. Now I wanted to show you the difference between a good push rod and rocker and one that has wear. So this one that I'm showing you first is the bad one. You can see that it has more of a brushed finish. That tells me that there was a lubrication problem between the push rod and the rocker, whereas this one has a mirror finish. Same with the end of the push rod. That tells me this was lubricated correctly and this one was not. Next, I'm going to take a minute and remove this steam pipe and all of the 10mm headed top head bolts. Unfortunately, the 1/2-inch breaker bar is no longer with us, so I had to use the 3/4, which should be just fine. I don't know if it'll sound different though. Or if it doesn't make a sound at all. It's just not the same. Let's see if it pees on me. God, I hope it doesn't. It's not leaking yet. Oh no! Well, one big difference between the early 6.2 Escalade or Denali engines, which is the L92, and the L94, which is this, is displacement on demand. And this is not what I mean by displacement on demand. This is, I mean, the wrist pin still looks good. It always does, though. The real question is, did the bore survive? Also, it looks as if we have a ding on that piston. A couple dings there. Well, the bore has some pretty significant damage. I think it might be okay. It's really going to depend on what the rest of the engine looks like once we get it apart. Obviously, it's going to need sleeves because that's way deeper than 20 thousandths, and I don't think these 6.2s can go much further than that. Unfortunately, the cylinder head is not so great. Now, we did see one ding on a piston, and that's from that valve there. As a matter of fact, if you look at that, it looks like the seat has dropped. We may have to pull this head apart. And this one, well, that one's a goner. I mean, yeah, I suppose you could fix that, but I don't know that it's worth that, even on a rectangle port head. Now I'm hoping this is the good side. All right, I got a pan underneath this one. I think it's gonna leak a little. Just a little bit. Well, first things first, we need to do some science. Bad. Unexpected, but bad. You know, we forgot the science on this side, so okay. Even more. Are you sure? It's sure. Well, I'm still going to maintain that this is the good side, just because the bores don't look that bad. I mean, I don't know what they look like underneath the pistons, but this is definitely the good side. At least it has all four. This is the head from the other side, the side with multiple disconnecting rods. And nothing looks too bad except there's some gravel, some engine gravel hanging out right here. It's not too bad. It doesn't look like it's been embedded, but then again, it would have to have an intact rod to push the piston up to do that. There's a little bit there. This head might be okay. Now we'll get the water pump out of the way. I put a pan down here because these things really like to leak. I did pull 6 bolts out, right? I did. It's leaking a little bit. Oh, on my foot. Well, it's an original water pump. Spins nice. Looks good. Now we're going to get the harmonic balancer off. Now, unfortunately, I lost the long rod for my harmonic balancer puller, but thankfully GM inserted 16 push rods. Sorry, I get confused. They're the same length, same diameter. It's a good idea to get a little bit of oil on the ends. We're not going to do that, but if you don't do that, it turns into a pretzel. I'm sure this one will be just fine. Uh-oh. Okay. Let's do a little reset here. We're going to use the mid-length rod from the set, which is just a little bit stronger than a push rod. Alright. And now we'll get a push rod, a different one. Yeah, that one worked just fine. Now we'll pull the front timing cover. Huh. Those bolts are already missing. Well, that's peculiar. In fact, some of the oil pan bolts are missing too. Oh, I think I know what happened here. Okay, that's not going to be nearly as exciting. There's the front cover. Looks like it's pretty nice, but VVT covers are worthless. Now, before I get into any of this, we're actually going to get the VLOM off, Valley Lifter oil manifold, or very likely an obvious malfunction. And then we'll pull the lifters and see what those look like. Yeah, that's pretty grungy, but I bet it still works. I mean, it did. The lifters are all in pretty good shape. All the rollers are nice, everything moves pretty smoothly. None of the DoD lifters are collapsed. It's pretty impressive considering how terrible the inside of the crankcase looks, at least underneath the valve covers. Now it's time to pull the cam. Wow! I did not expect that to explode, but I missed my bin. Well, the cam doesn't look too bad. I don't see any damaged lobes except... Where are we looking? I think we're right here. Right there. And then if we roll this a little further, right there as well. So I think this was from flying debris. There's another mark right there. I think this was from flying debris when this engine let go. But I don't see any, I mean, of course, there's some marks on some of the lobes. It's not perfect. But it's not like it had a failed lifter and somebody put new lifters on top of it. We've seen that before. Now, I did a little looking in this, and there's no pickup in it because I believe this engine has been apart. So we're going to go ahead and get the oil pump off, pull this stuff off the front of the block. Just like so.
There's that nice, sweet, sweet timing chain.
Save that for later. In pursuit of the truth, we need to take the oil pump apart to see what it looks like. It's really not too bad. There's really nothing to show you guys. There's just a little bit of wear. It's not even going to show up on my camera. Everything looks okay. It's maybe a little bit of debris ran through here. I see some circular scratches on the side there, but that probably happened at the very end. It's a shame we won't have a pickup to look in. This pan has clearly been removed, so there aren't a full set of bolts to remove. There's just some. And yet there is still oil in here or something like it. Oh, I see some things. So I'm going to use my fluid vac here. I could pour this out, but I don't want to lose any of the contents in here since I just don't want to. Yeah, that's just water. That must have been from sitting outside. Oh, there's definitely some junk down there. Well, let's see what we have. We have a decent looking rod bearing. That is part of a piston. But this is the most telling right here. This piece right here and this right here. That my friends, that is a valve seat. That's out of the cylinder head, and that's likely what blew this engine up. We've got some small piston nuggets. There's some more valve seat. And what is in here besides some sort of goo? Oh, that's not too bad. We have a clip for a wrist pin. That I really don't want to dig around in here anymore, but I'm still doing it. I just want to know. That's all piston. Yeah, this is all piston in here. Well, it's time to flip this thing over, and I think you'll see why everything was so... Aw, no pan? Come on, Eric. This is amateur hour. There, now I can put the pan on the coolant. Yeah, you guys can probably already see. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff disconnected in there. So what likely happened is that this engine was locked up or it wouldn't turn all the way over, and then someone took it apart so that it could rotate it to get all the torque converter bolts out. That's what I would guess has occurred here. So this is actually going to take like 5 seconds probably, oh, maybe like 10. Also, unfortunately, the rod caps are gone for most of these, which renders the rods completely useless. Let's go ahead and push these out. I said let's go ahead and push these out. Come on, let go. Nope, let's get that brass drift. Unfortunately, I don't really need to worry about how I take care of this because, well, they're pretty much useless without the rod caps. See, they have a fractured rod surface, and unless I have the matching cap, you'll never be able to use that. I have a couple. I have one. These are banged up, and maybe two. Great. And we do have one rod cap here, so this one will be pulled. Now it's time for the next two. I don't know how I'm going to do this unless I need to rotate this crankshaft blue. I think that might be enough to get that out. Now it will come out.
Oh no, the bearing.
Next, this is the one with the piston delete. You can tell by the amount of adjustability. They're not supposed to come out that way, just FYI. Now this one might be okay, but let's see if it'll come out. I'm going to use the bearing surface to push this through, just in case this rod might be okay. And then there was one. Will you just... Well, that was good. No, I'm just kidding, it wasn't good. What really happened here is that it deleted one piston, and it probably threw a bunch of junk from that piston and locked up the crank, and they took it apart to get it to turn over, which, look, I get it. You guys got to get the torque converter off when you're in that job, but the bearings that are here are really not that bad. There weren't that many of them, but they don't really look that damaged. The pistons, on the other hand, a lot of wear on that side of the skirt. It's pretty uniform. The degree of wear is different, but then in this cylinder, oh, is this one here. We've got a little ding in the top, and that's from the dropped valve seat. This is the one that blew a piston apart, and I would wager that this valve seat matches this cylinder, We'll find that out here in just a few minutes. The rest of these, there's some damage here. I think I might get 2 rods out of this, which I know who buys single rods, but I do sell them as sets of 8, and I don't always get a full set, so sometimes I save the good ones until I have a full set. And you can see that that rod is bent just a little, just enough to feel it. First, let's get this off. That one's been replaced. Now, unfortunately, there are only bolts in one of the main caps. I'm at least happy that the main caps are here if the block is savable. Oh, and they weren't all tight. There are still these bolts in the main cap, so let's get those out. All right, now this should just boop. Yep, boop. Surprisingly, the crank doesn't look too bad. It's not perfect. I don't think whoever took this apart was particularly careful, but I don't see any deep marks. The worst of it is actually these 2 journals right here, because there was some moisture and they have some rust. So that might need some machine work. Then, of course, there's damage to the counterbalances. It's not awful. I don't know if it's going to be worth selling. These cranks are not that hard to find. This is the big shocker, actually. The block doesn't look too bad. That's about the worst of the damage right there. I mean, obviously it's not perfect and it's not going to command perfect price by any stretch, but I think that's still usable. You could grind some of that down, and I'll show you what the bores look like. That one's got some pretty bad scratching. They all do. That side isn't as bad, but this side is pretty wiped out. So it's going to need machine work one way or the other. So it may be hard to tell, but the bore is kind of beat up, and I don't know that taking it to machine shop is going to be able to get this fixed with boring this cylinder. I think it'll probably need a sleeve, and this may be a good block for sleeving. I don't see any cracks in the actual block. I think this was a relatively low RPM failure, just judging by the lack of major damage. I mean, obviously it's blown up bad, but I think it's still somewhat salvageable. At least it won't end up in the scrap bin. Now I'm going to remove 2 of the valves. I'm going to remove this intake valve because I think that seat has dropped. And we're going to move that one because I think that one deleted a seat. So we're going to flip this over. And we're going to do this in the safest manner possible. Okay, springs look good. Now we should be able to slide these valves out. Look, Ma, no seat. And that one has fallen. I wonder if we can pull that out of there. Probably not. It's probably still pretty well in there. We do have this tool called Blue. See if we can just... I don't think that's going to do it. So this is the cylinder that deleted the seat. You can see that's where the seat sits. And when that seat fell, it probably hung that valve open pretty far and shattered that piston. And this one was on its way. You can see it's kind of fallen at an angle, and that's what's responsible for the ding in the other piston. It's pretty clear what happened here. This engine was overheated, and that cylinder head, Chris Hansen 2 of those pistons, and told them to take a seat. 2 of those pistons had valve damage. One of them was obliterated. One of them was completely gone. It dropped the valve seat completely, broke the seat apart, broke the piston apart. I think this all happened pretty quickly. I don't think this was a long, drawn-out failure. It was likely something where they shut the car off, which allowed things to cool at different rates. It dropped the seat. They started it back up. They heard some noise. They maybe gave it gas, and it just popped. It probably locked the engine up. There wasn't a ton of damage to the block, which is amazing. Usually when these delete pistons, the block is done. Now, I'm not saying that this block is ready to go. It certainly needs a ton of work, but it's better than scrap metal. So if you'd like a bare 6.2 block that needs sleeves and some machine work, I'm happy to sell it cheap, way cheaper than I would normally sell a 6.2 block. I got a few other good parts out of it. I got an intake manifold, a wiring harness I can probably repair. I got a set of rockers, although I'll need to replace one of them. It wasn't a bad deal for me. It wasn't a home run by any stretch. These are expensive, but it was way better that the block wasn't total junk. We pull down a lot of LS engines here. So I've seen this many, many times, and it's always the same type of cylinder head. It's always a rectangle port head, which is an 821 casting, an 823 casting, or a 5364. And that comes on 2007 and later, which is the Gen 4 6-liter and 6.2 liter. So Escalades, 2500 and 3500 6-liter trucks, Denalis, and even some of the Silverados and Sierras with 6.2s. I've seen them drop intake valve seats. It's always the larger intake valve seat. Maybe one time I've seen that on a cathedral port head, but probably 20 or 30 times on rectangle port heads, which is a lot considering maybe only once for cathedral. And I think it's the fact that they're larger valves, so they're larger, heavier seats. These things get hot, and if they shut off in just the right position with the valves open, it allows that seat to fall down. And the next time you start it, piston meets the valve because the valve isn't closed, and everything explodes. So you might ask yourself, what can I do to prevent this? Don't let it get hot. Just watch your gauges, and maybe there might be a scenario in which they fall and the engine doesn't overheat. And it seems that I've seen that 1 or 2 times, but for the most part, it's usually an overheat situation that gets the ball rolling on that type of failure. This would normally be the end of the video, but we're doing 2 today because it's the 200,000 subscriber special. So let's get this 5.3 torn down. Now, on this engine, we do have spark plugs. So that's going to be the first thing we do is pull the plugs and take a look. Well, we've got one AC Delco, super worn down. Actually, it's not that bad. The rest of these are auto lights. I don't know why you couldn't get that one out. These are not that difficult to do plugs in, but that's not the worst part. It's cylinder 1. Cylinder 1 has gone strapless and everything else-less. It's been mechanically destroyed. So, yeah. Cylinder 1 has some malice in the combustion palace. When I first got this engine in, it had no crank bolt or harmonic balancer, so I stole the bolt out of the last engine we just did, just so we can see if we can turn it over. Now, I am going to use my short bar here. We're going to see if this thing moves. Oh, it does. It also stops. It goes and stops. Let's see if it goes the other way. Not like that. Well, the bolt's loosening. So we know we got some problems in there. Also, when I turn the crank, it kind of sounds like a cash register. It's not a good sign. Next, we're going to get this left valve cover off. Uh-oh. Well, as soon as I pop the valve cover off, I notice this. The lone nugget. It's a little bitty guy. How did it make it all the way up here? There's really not very many ways for that to travel up here, but if you look a little closer, you can kind of see a little bit of sparkles right there. Everything seems to have a little metallic hue inside of here. Now the next thing I need to do is remove the other valve cover. The dipstick is kind of being a problem already. We're just gonna do that. This side already looks a lot better, simply because it doesn't have a chunk of metal in it. I don't see anything too terrible here, but we haven't really begun to get this apart. Just like the last engine, we're going to start with the exhaust manifolds. Now we must face the dipstick again. I think we can do this. 2 for 2. Oh man, the sun's shining bright now. Now we'll crack the rockers loose. Uh-oh. That must be for a 2-angle valve job. Oh no! That one's bent too. Seems that all of the intake ones are bent. So far, so good. Bad. Extra bad. That's a 3-angle valve job. Well, some of these look a little different than they're supposed to. That one is by far the worst. These are all bent, and these are all bent. 7 bent push rods. Just like the last one, I'm going to take a minute, remove the steam pipe, and the 10mm headed head bolts. Now remember, this is the side that had the mechanically destroyed spark plug. So, you know what? I feel like we should get a pan, because I don't know. I would prefer to keep as much fluid off the floor as possible. Oh. Boy, I guess I wasn't kidding when I said these were the worst too. It's just gone, and I'm really surprised that there is wait a second. What am I looking at? Uh-oh. That's not good. That's not good at all. You can see that there are definite valve indentations, and that's from all, those are all the bent push rods right there. So something is wrong that we're going to find out when we pull the rest of this apart. That was also the most profound thing I think I've ever said. So you're not supposed to look at that side of the rod. And that means that since the rod cap bolts are facing me, there's a whole bunch of broken. I can see all kinds of broken stuff in there. That's going to be bad. Here's some more damage. You can see there's the big ding from the intake valve. That one got a double intake and exhaust. And somehow a ring migrated over to this cylinder. I don't know how that happened. It must have done that through the intake. I did not get an intake manifold with this engine. So that's probably how that got there, which is crazy. Now, the good side. I think this is the good side. That wasn't tight. Or that. Or that. So that was kind of strange that the outer bolts weren't tight. Okay, will this actually be the better side? That's not right. I think it's safe to say yes. So what's interesting is that piston is pretty clean. Doesn't look like it had a breached head gasket. But we need to do our test on this engine. We haven't done that. So let's test all 8 cylinders, 7 cylinders, and see what happens. That one is a disconnecting rod. Okay, so those are all good. Well, we think. Well, we can clearly tell that that rod is broken, besides the fact that when I pushed on it, it fell about 2 inches into the bore. That piston is rotated. These are all, okay, that one actually looks okay. Might be a little ding right there. But these two have damage from making contact with the cylinder head. That's kind of a bummer, which means, I mean, we predicted that. We saw that the push rods were bent. That means that the valves are going to have some damage as well. Let's go look at both of those cylinder heads. Here's the combustion chamber that matches the deleted piston. As you can see, it took just a couple of hits, about 2,000 times over. The rest of these don't look too bad, except that valve is clearly bent pretty badly. I would wager that these valves all have some damage. I can see that they're a little higher in the back than they are here. So this head is definitely not worth repairing. Now we go to the other head, and all of these have made contact, and I say all of these, all the intake valves have made contact with the pistons. And I can see that that one's bent, that one's bent, that one might be okay, and that one is bent as well. But the head might be worth slamming some valves into, lapping them, and that might be okay. But one head so far is not really that great. Let's get this water pump out of the way. We're loose already. So that is an aftermarket pump, I believe. No, that's factory pump. It's got a factory part number on it. It's got a stock number on it. So this came out of a, ooh, that sounds bad. You hear that? Not good. Next, we'll remove the Vlam. This one actually looks like it's in pretty good shape. Now let's go ahead and pull these lifters. Oh, wait. Oh, that's not good. That is not good. Well, I guess I just get used to not seeing any kind of damage in the Valley of LS's. But, that is not a good place to park your rod. Talking about connecting rod, of course. That's not where that goes. Blew some chunks of stuff up here. This is going to be a lot of fun to get apart. Now let's pull the lifters. Well, right off the bat, you guys should see a problem here. That DOD lifter is collapsed. That's puzzling how that could ever happen. I mean, that happens all the time. That's a really common failure on these lifters, but it's certainly not enough to do this kind of damage. All the rollers seem to be all right. There's a little bit notchy in some of them, but they all spin pretty freely. I don't think they've chewed up a camshaft or anything. All right, next, we're going to pull this front cover. if I can pull this off with my hands. Oh, yeah. Oh. Ah. That's broken. Yeah, that's not good. The front cover has some little piston nuggets in it. Nothing too crazy. Just a few pieces, but the front cover is worth money. I do sell these quite a bit, so if you need one of these, which is non-variable valve timing Gen 4 front cover, I usually have these in stock. I'm curious to see how this turns over here. That's quite a bit of slack, and then, oh, yeah, sounds, it's like when you hit the jackpot. I better stop doing that. A couple things worth mentioning here. The timing tensioner has just exploded, and it's hard to say whether that happened from whatever happened to this engine or part of the reason. The other thing is this is a replacement oil pump. That's not a GM oil pump. I don't really know who makes that. I'm sure we can figure that out. But someone's been in here before. Boy, have I said that before. Wait, not like that. Now we're going to see if we can pull the cam. And this may not come out because of all the debris that's surrounding the cam. Oh, come on, Blue. Where are you? Well, that is a first for me. Oh, no. Well, I think we can explain a few things here. So what happened is there's supposed to be a pin that locates the cam gear on the camshaft. And what has occurred is whatever made this horrendous quick stop sheared the pin off, and this spun on the camshaft, which is why that was kind of wedged on there. And that's why so many valves hit pistons. So there's the damage to the cam gear. And that is where the pin is supposed to go. And there is the sheared off pin and the damage to the nose of the camshaft. This is going to be fun to get out. Also, more chunks of pistons. It's everywhere. Well, I guess here goes nothing. Yeah, that's not even, that's just laughing at me. I don't even know if this turns. We're going to try that next. Let's run this bolt all the way in. We're going to try to turn just the camshaft. All right, it turns. Yeah, we'll get this out, I think. I hope. Oh, man. There should be some damage. Let's see if we can... I just heard something fall into the pan. Well, that's better than I expected. No, I'm not. Since I put the bolt back in it, you know what? We're going to hit it with the impact. And that way I can get some leverage and get this cam out without doing any damage to the engine, because that would be terrible. That's good for it. Seem to have reached an That's not good. An impasse. Come on. Oh, yes. Success! Well, I've always heard that some of the older GM camshafts were notorious for wiping lobes off, but I'm pretty sure this is not what they meant. This is major damage from making contact with flying debris, actually probably wedged debris. It could have locked that cam up, whatever caused this. That's probably part of a connecting rod, and that could be why it sheared that pin. The rest of the camshaft doesn't look too bad. It's just right there. Of course, and the sheared off pin. At this point, it is time to pull the oil pan. Normally I'd flip the engine upside down, but I know there's some piston nuggets in this gift basket. So let's get this pan off, That way I don't have to fish all that broken stuff out of the engine. I'm going to leave that bolt kind of threaded in there. I don't know how heavy this gift basket's going to be. Oh. It appears that the windage tray stopped most of the debris from making it into the pan. I'm going to pull the oil baffle out. I'm going to see, uh-oh, that bolt's backed out. Someone been in here before? All those bolts were loose. Well, so in this part, there's a section of rod. That's rod. That's like the half of the rod. Wow. I've never seen a rod broken like that. Got part of a ring. I don't really see too much aluminum. And inside of the pan is just, it's pretty sludgy, but not a lot of pieces. At this point, I'm going to pull the pickup and the windage tray in this position because it's pretty full. Ooh, it's slimy. Uh-oh. We're dropping stuff. Well, no wonder this engine blew up. The pickup's full of engine parts. You're not can't get any oil past any of that. There's still a lot in there. It's not as packed as we've seen, but you're not supposed to store chunks of metal in there. We've certainly seen pickups that were more full. That's still stuff that's not supposed to be in there. Another thing I wanted to look at, since we know the oil pump's been replaced, let's look at this O-ring. These things get flat and then they don't seal. This one isn't really so bad. Also does not look like an OEM one. They're usually orange. For you keen listeners, when I pulled that pickup tube out, there was a piece of engine that fell out and hit the ground, made a distinct sound. Sounded like this. That, my friends, is the sound of tool steel. There is only one component of an engine like this, of which is made out of tool steel. That is the wrist pin. I rest my pin. Case. That's part of a wrist pin out of this engine. It is now time to remove the windage tray. I know there's going to be lots of parts that rain down in this process, and you can see the windage tray has been slightly filled in this area. Ooh, smoke. All right, I think I've got one bolt left, or nut. Okay, let's see what happens here. See if we can carefully, and I definitely don't want to bend anything. See if the socket fits on it now. Oh, yes. All right, you ready for the reveal? What? It doesn't come out. Oh. Oh. That's bad. Well, that's part of a wrist pin. That's part of a wrist pin. One piston nugget. One, I think that's piston, yep. That's all. It's kind of a like one, not a family size by any stretch. Yeah, these are like hammer forged nuggets here. Oh, there's the little end of a rod. There's some more connecting rod. Piston. Oh, look, rings. 2, 3. Well, I don't think there's 4 rings here. This isn't an Audi. Let's see here. Oh, it appears that there are some wedged components. let's just fix this. There we go. I bet we could fix this. Look at that. It's like Pangea. Oh, we're missing a critical component, apparently. Almost. It's almost still usable. That's broken pretty bad. Now let's flip the engine over. Man, that windage tray, though. That took a wallop. All right, you guys are going to watch this as I turn it over. Oh, it's leaking. I didn't get a pan. What the? Almost 200 videos, and I still forget to put a pan under here. Yeah, that caught like 10% of it. Oh, that was the socket. I regret that decision to place a socket on top of this engine. It's also dropping stuff. So that's where all the broken stuff is. It's very broken. Well, that's where the wrist pin is supposed to be. We just ripped it right out of the bottom of that piston. Jeez, look at the block. Obviously, these are mint. There's a lot of bang marks in here. That sounds wrong. The rest of these definitely have damage. All the way back here. These two aren't too bad. Might get 2 rods out of this thing. Probably not. Now we can pull the oil pump. Timing chain. Gotta be careful with this. Let's take a look at this thing. So this is a Melling oil pump. It has a date stamp from 2019. I don't know how long this engine's been a core. I've only had it for less than a month. Unlike a normal GM unit, this has Torx on the front of it, so we're going to go ahead and pull this thing apart. Ooh, it's gritty. It's super gritty. It's like 60 grit. You can almost hear that. Listen. Now this looks a lot different than your normal LS pump. Let's see if I can go dig out the parts of the other pump. We can compare the two. First, I'm going to give these a little bath here. So here are the two rotor sets. This is the Melling. This is the OEM General Motors. You can see the General Motors is considerably thicker. The General Motors is also the same diameter. So this pump has essentially less surface area in here. But I don't know if that matters. Like I'm not that guy that's going to be able to tell you, oh yeah, this is better because it's bigger. This is definitely bigger doesn't always mean better. But this pump is spent, and I really would struggle to blame the pump for this type of failure with this engine. I don't think it has anything to do with it, but it was for sure ruined in this endeavor. The housing is really grooved up. It's really scarred up. It's sadly scrap metal, but it's a used oil pump. We don't really sell very many. Here's a better look at the damage on that oil pump gear set. And the housing, lots of grooves cut into that aluminum. Now the heads of these bolts are pretty deformed from being a hammer, so it may require a little bit of force and hammering to get these out. We'll see. We might. Oh, they're just loose. No, they're just loose. Okay. Forget I said that. Oh. It's gone. Let's see if we have the same luck on the second cylinder. Yep. Even though that doesn't fit. Yep. Whoopsies. There's remnants of a bearing here. It's pretty much chewed up. Now let's turn this engine over and get to the next two. These things are just falling out of the bores. Now on to the next. Last two.
Come back.
Here are the bearings. As you can see, this one is in great shape. This is actually the goo that we found all over the inside of the engine. It's that metal paste. That's the adjacent cylinder. It's rough, very bad. And these are all pretty damaged. They get better as you go towards the back of the engine, which I guess they're the last to keep oil pressure. That doesn't make any sense. I did check. These bearings are from 08 and they are standard bearings, so I don't think anyone's been in here. Now this is what I'd consider the exploded view of the rods and pistons. Now this rod is actually bent. This wrist pin somehow, it's in pretty good shape. It would work in a pinch. Some piston nuggets. That is a wrist pin. In fact, let's give this a little bath real quick. I forgot to do that. We'll do that on camera. We'll see how shiny it is. There we go. Wrist pin. It's been a while since we've seen a broken wrist pin in an LS engine. It has happened. I think it was probably about 1.5 years ago. It was also a 5.3. And then the rest of the rods and pistons all have marks. They've been shot peened inside the crankcase, not in a good way. And all the pistons have a new valve relief. These were non-variable valve timing pistons, so no valve reliefs, but the engine was decided to make its own valve relief. And this one was clean. This is probably from the cylinder with the collapsed DOD lifter. And all these have some pretty significant skirt wear. Interesting that the rings are lined up there. Now some of the wrist pins are pretty stiff as well. These are full floaters, but a lot of these, the pin moves inside the rod, but not inside the actual piston. So something's wrong there. That one's got 2. Let's get that crank out. I kind of goofed up. I should have pulled this rear plate before the engine made it to the stand, but I think might be able to get this out anyway. I'm wrong. Well, let's look at this crank. It's bad. It's super bad. Also, I can't really get this off. This is the main bearing. Oh, it does come off. Let's see. Come to me. So that bearing's in good shape. There's the front bearing. These mains are rough. Look at that thrust bearing. Look at that journal is wiped. There's metal chunks throughout everything. Oh, we got another bearing shell stuck on here. Those are greatly ruined. Yeah, this crank is trash. I mean, yes, you probably could fix it, but at the same time, this crank has waged a war, and the counterbalance is just, it's got battle scars all over. I don't think anyone could ever justify spending any money to reuse this crank. It's a 5.3 crank, which is pretty much just a standard LS crank. It's nothing special. It'll probably end up in the scrap bin. Now I'm going to caution you guys, because we're going to start at the back. And when you start at the back, just make sure you're wearing some gloves, you know. And this part looks good, except for that little piece of piston jammed between the block and the crank sensor. The rest of this looks good. And then you get here. So you can see the bottom of that bore's got a bite missing out of it. Obviously, half a piston. Let's see if we can push that through. Oh no, we'll get that out, I think. I mean, there's tons of marks all over this block. If this was an aluminum block, it would absolutely have holes in it. But the iron blocks are pretty strong and resilient. Its block is still junk. I mean, no one's going to do anything with this. It's kind of a waste. And there's even impact marks up there by the lifters. Even there. Man. Ah, yes. I mean, that's most of a piston. Actually smashed the top of the crown, and that's why the ring is stuck. Yeah, it's still good. The bore is, well, it's rough. It's actually dented in right there. Obviously, we know this engine is done. The rest of the bores have some vertical scratching, but it's not like that one. And in this cylinder, the piston actually protected most of the bore from the wrist pin. Actually, the wrist pin died in this one, so that's why that one survived. The rest of these, they look all right, but it's kind of a moot point. A Gen 4 5.3 with oiling problems? Man, I feel like we've seen this before. In fact, I'm pretty sure everyone ever has seen this before, because it's a very common problem. Anything with displacement on demand, it's a problem. Those engines use oil. They don't usually end up quite this bad. This is an extreme example of it. Again, I told you I saved some of the worst cores for this video, the 2 worst of the lot that I bought. Usually, they just collapse the lifter, and people put lifters or camshafts in them, and that fixes it. In this case, someone tried to fix it by putting an oil pump in it, and it didn't work, not even a little. It was a waste of time and money, and I guess whoever was driving it was probably idling in the drive-thru or going 100 miles an hour down the highway. One of those 2 scenarios. When that bearing came apart, it allowed the piston to travel further up into the bore, smash into the cylinder head, and when that happened, the piston shattered. The parts of the piston fell down in the bore, turned into piston nuggets when they got wedged between the adjacent rod and the block, broke that rod. When that all happened, it probably locked up the camshaft, sheared the pin off of that, which held the valves open, and what was still turning came up and hit the valves, and that's why every single piston has valve dents in it. Kind of a shame. Not a lot of good parts out of this core. Sometimes they do really well, and one of these engines will have just a damaged lifter and a cam, which is no big deal. And then sometimes they're like this, where, well, I got a video out of it. So I think that's worth it. Usually that's worth it. I really hope you enjoyed this type of teardown. By the way, if you were wondering what it takes to keep this from happening, to stop your DoD engine from using oil, remove the DoD parts. That's what I did to my 2011 Tahoe, the police truck that you've seen on the channel in the past. And I did that some 60,000 miles ago. It uses no oil, whereas it did use oil before. It lost half of a mile per gallon. Totally worth it. Drives great, gets 19 to 20 miles to the gallon on the highway. How can you complain? It's about $700 worth of parts to do that. It takes about a day if you're used to turning wrenches. I think it's totally worth it, and I would suggest doing that. And if you don't do that, you can also at least turn it off with a, can I say that? Yes, you should just disable it. Best way I could put that. Really hope you enjoyed this 200,000 subscriber special. I can't believe that's happened. 200,000. That's a lot. Anyway, if you'd like to buy any of the parts off of the 2 engines I've torn down, either for your desk or maybe there's a few good surviving parts, or if you want to buy any LS parts, I've got heads, I've got blocks, cranks, rods and pistons, intake manifolds, just send me an email, or you can go to Importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've got all kinds of loose parts on there. All of my parts cars I've been uploading almost every single day. If you don't see what you're looking for on the website, you can fill out our part request form. Sends us an email of exactly what you're looking for. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.